Over the past couple of weeks in QP Youth, we've looked at the first couple of chapters of Genesis. In our first week, we looked at Genesis 1 and thought about God as creator bringing order to chaos and pushing back the chaos in creation. And then we thought last week about Genesis chapter 2, about God creating human beings, about him creating Adam and Eve, man and woman, in his image, to be creative, to be co-creators with him. And today we're going to move on. We're going to think about Genesis chapter 3. And this is the point at which it all goes wrong. It's the point at which humankind decides to go their own way, where Adam and Eve decide to turn their backs on God. God has created them and given them full freedom to be completely who they are made to be, to exist in a fullness of their own personalities and abilities and giftings. And yet they choose what they believe to be a greater freedom. But I'm pretty sure we can all realise that it is a lesser freedom. Ultimately, what they did was they made themselves, as it says later on in scripture, they made themselves slaves to sin. They decided that they didn't want to live God's way and thought they were going after some freedom, but ultimately end up being mastered by sin itself. And sin is simply the stuff that goes against God's best way of doing things. Goes against God's best for us. It's the things that hurts God. It's disobedience to him. And when Adam and Eve eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as we read in Genesis 3, that is them saying, God, you know what? We think we know better than you. You might be the creator. You might have made us, but we think we know better than you. So we're just going to go our own way and do our own thing. And we often talk about how this decision to sin, to commit the first sin, to eat the fruit, breaks the relationship between humankind and God. It causes this break, this eternal rift between God and mankind that needs something to fix it. But I think if we really read Genesis 3, we realise that it's not just that humankind's relationship with God is broken, but there is more broken when sin enters the world. We see very clearly, very, very quickly, that our relationships with one another are broken. God says that there is going to be problems between husband and wife. There will be problems between Adam and Eve. When we read into Genesis 4, just the very next chapter, it talks about the children of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, and one brother killing another brother. Their ability to live together and to support one another, to be suitable helpers for each other, is gone, is broken when sin enters the world. So our relationship with God is broken, our relationship with one another is broken. But that's not all that we read about in Genesis chapter 3. When sin enters the world, it also causes creation to be broken. Do you know, some of the conversations I have with friends who aren't Christians, people I meet who aren't Christians, is often around the whole thing of natural disasters. Why do these things happen in the world? Why do volcanoes erupt or earthquakes happen? Why do things not grow properly? Why are there sometimes floods and sometimes droughts? Now we know some of that is caused by climate change, and I'll come to that in a minute. But some of it happened before we saw the effects of climate change. Some of this has happened for thousands and thousands of years. If you go back and read in the Old Testament, you'll read of times of great harvest, of flourishing crops, and then you'll read of times of great famine where crops just wouldn't grow. There were seasons where it didn't rain. There were seasons where it rained too much. We see it But it's because the world, creation itself, has been broken by sin. God says, do you know what? You're going to toil in the ground. You're going to work really, really hard. And sometimes stuff just isn't going to grow. You're not going to really easily have all you want, and at times even all that you need to eat, simply from working the ground by your own efforts, because it's broken. It's not like being in the Garden of Eden where things flourished. But this is about being outside of that, being out in the chaos and trying to survive in that. The creation itself is broken. So our relationship with God is broken. Our relationship with one another is broken by sin. Creation itself is broken. But then also, I think, fourthly and finally, our relationship with creation is broken by sin entering this world. God gave us a command that we thought about last week to go out and to multiply, to take care of creation, to take responsibility for creation, to look after it. And when sin entered the world and Adam and Eve's relationship with God broke down in that instance, also their desire and their ability to obey him in the call to take responsibility for creation was broken as well. So instead of taking care of creation, Adam and Eve come head first into creation. There's a clash between mankind and the rest of creation. Now, we are seeing it at a vastly expanding rate in our society just now. Advances that we've made in industrialisation and all sorts of other things mean that we are seeing increasing climate change. We are seeing more and more problems, and we know so much of it is caused by human action, and at times human inaction as well. We have damaged and killed parts of this planet rather than taking responsibility for it and helping it to flourish and to grow. We need to choose to take responsibility for that. To recognise that just as originally this happened because Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and sin entered the world, that we make decisions that continuously cause damage to the planet around us as well. And next week we're going to be thinking about what God has done to deal with this problem. Today we are going to focus a bit on the problem, and that might seem quite a harsh way to finish. It might feel quite depressing, but what I would say to you looking forward to next week is there is an answer. Okay, so don't get stuck in the negativity, but we are going to take some time today just to look specifically at the negative side of what happened.